class, Prof JC here, coming to you from Minneapolis, Minnesota this week. Freezing cold in Minneapolis, Minnesota, here for another board meeting. And it's been a really cold trip. I actually get on a plane later this evening and get back to San Diego. I'm very excited for that. But hey, I'm recording our podcast here today, and I've got the suit jacket on because I'm in between meetings. But I wanted to make sure that I was able to get these out. This week we're on page 172, and we're talking about this idea of inquiring to learn. So again, this whole class is about difficult conversations, or this entire book. Sorry, the class is about communication. This entire book is about difficult conversations. And so what we're going to talk about today is this idea of when we sit down to have a difficult conversation with somebody, are we inquiring to accuse, acquiring to put somebody else on the defense, or are we inquiring to learn more about the situation? So here's what it says on page 172. The heading says it all: inquire to learn, and only to learn. You can tell whether a question will help the conversation or hurt it by thinking about why you asked it. The only good question is, the only good answer is to learn. So anytime I ask a question, am I trying to learn or am I trying to prove a point? We all know people like that. Again, sitting in these meetings the last couple of days, people will, they will disguise their statement in the form of a question. You've done it before. I've done it before, right? It could be an accusatory. When you said that thing, is that, my understanding is this over here and this over here. So, is that kind of what you were saying? And not really trying to learn. They're trying to make this point about over here. What I think you just said is this. And so it's not really about learning. It's about trying to make an accusation, put somebody else on the defensive. And so when we inquire to learn, that's really important. So the very first point it makes is, it says, don't make statements disguised as questions. We just talked about that, right? And then it says, anyone who's ever been in a kid in a car has uttered the cranky words, "Are we there yet?" You know that we're not there yet. And your parents know, and so they respond in a tone as cranky as yours. What you really meant when you made that kind of statement is, I'm feeling restless, or I wish I were there, or this is a long trip for me. My daughter has done this to me. My daughters have done this to me numerous amounts of time. Are we there yet? And what they're saying is, I'm getting sick and tired of being in this car. All right. So that's an example of disguising a statement in a question. Here's some other ones it gives. Are you going to leave the refrigerator door, or are you going to leave the refrigerator door open like that? Instead of, hey, can you please close the refrigerator door? Is it impossible for you to focus on me just once? Instead of, hey, I feel ignored. I'd like for you to pay attention to me. Do you have to drive so fast? Instead of, hey, I'm feeling nervous, or it's hard for me to relax when I'm not in control. See, those are statements that we can make, as opposed to kind of the passive aggressive, disguising it as a question. And that's what it really is. It's passive aggressiveness, which means that we lack courage. Anytime we do something like that, we disguise a statement in the form of a question. It just shows that we have to hide behind something, right? It shows our own lack of courage, our own willingness to have the tougher conversations. Page 173 says, don't use questions to cross-examine. This is really good as well. A second error that gets us into trouble is using questions to shoot holes in the other person's argument. For example, you seem to think this is my fault, but surely you'd agree that you made more mistakes than I did, wouldn't you? Here's another example. If it's true that you did everything you could that you could have done to make the sale, how do you explain the fact that Kate was able to make the sale so soon after you gave up? Ooh. These questions are wrong-footed from the start. They emerge from a purpose of trying to persuade the other person that you are right and they are wrong, rather than trying to learn. So again, inquiring to learn. Every question we bring to the table in any situation should only be about filling in those gaps that we have where we lack knowledge. It's just to learn. That's it. So it says this: ask open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are questions that give the other person broad latitude on how to answer. They elicit more information than yes, no questions or offering menus such as, were you trying to do A or B? Instead of asking, what were you trying to do? Right. This way you don't bias the answer or distract the other person's thinking by the need to process your ideas. So it's just that it's that open-ended question, right? Something that doesn't have a yes or no answer. Ask those questions and give the other person room to speak. Ask for more concrete information. To understand where the other person's conclusion came from and enrich your understanding of what they envision going forward, it helps to ask them to be more explicit about the reasoning and their vision. What leads you to say that? Can you give me an example? What would that look like? How could that work? How would that work? How would we test that hypothesis, right? So again, when we give people questions like that, it helps them process more on their own. I used to have a boss who was very good at doing this kind of stuff. I'd bring these big, grandiose ideas, and he would say something like that is, well, can you give me an example? Or what would that look like? Or, how could we make that work? How could you make that work? And then I'd have to really think through that. And sometimes he knew that he knew what the answer would be, but sometimes I had to process through that and begin to see that, hey, this probably won't work, right? So I had to ask, so he had to ask in that kind of a way. And then I love this one right here. Make it safe for them not to answer. Sometimes even the most skilled question provokes defensiveness. You ask a question out of genuine caring toward the other person and a genuine desire to learn, and still they react by shutting down, defending, counterattacking, accusing you of bad intentions, or changing the subject. One response is to say that you are trying to help and that there is no need to be defensive, and then continue to press for an answer. But this can be experienced as an attempt to control them, right? You've all had people do that before. I've had people do that, to me before. Hey, don't get defensive. I'm just trying to get to the answer, right? And then they keep going for the answer, right? It's better to make your question an invitation rather than a demand, and to make that clear. The difference is that an invitation can be declined without penalty. Hey, I have something I need to talk to you about. I have a question I want to ask you, but if this is not the right time, if you don't want to answer right now, that's okay. Proceed with question, right? That gives them an out to say, oh, they might back up and say, I'm not ready to answer that question right now. Or they might, because they're not on the defensive, they've been given that permission as an out, they might decide to answer it as well. Whether you're talking to your boss or an 8-year-old daughter, giving them the choice of whether to answer increases the chance that they will respond honestly. Even if they don't answer now, they may later after they think about it. Knowing that it's their choice underscores your caring intent and frees them to think about the question. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Find one of these that we just talked about, and I want you to give me an example of maybe a time in your life that you did that thing, okay? One of the 4 we just talked about. And then tell me how you could have done that a little bit better, okay? And, again, there's so many examples that I can think of, that I've done these kind of things, right? Cross-examining statements as questions. So you just write about one of those, a time that you did that. What could you have done differently? And again, the purpose of this is just to make you think a little bit about something that's happened before, so that when you're going forward next time, you can say, okay, here's a better decision that I'm going to make going forward. I'm not going to make that same decision. Hey, thanks so much for listening today. And feel free to reach out if you need anything. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Take care, everybody.